There is no movie more disgusting than Pink Flamingos. This competition of revolting characters redefined the concept of bad taste, but attracted many followers. Carrying out such a bizarre project couldn't be less unusual. It is impossible to continue talking about Pink Flamingos without mentioning its director, John Waters. Born in 1946, John Samuel Waters Jr. grew up in Lutherville, a suburb of Baltimore, the city in which most of his films would be set. As a young man, he didn't feel comfortable in such an old-fashioned environment as he considered it. Besides, he already knew he was homosexual, but he couldn't say it out loud. However, he found refuge in cinema. He was fascinated by strange and shocking movies, and firstly, he found those qualities in the horror genre. One of his first idols was William Castle, who was more than just a director. For his films like The Tingler and The House of Haunted Hill, he designed tricks to heighten the audience's experience in the theater. John was also interested in Russ Meyer, a filmmaker specializing in erotic productions with strong women, and in Herschel Gordon Lewis, the creator of splatter cinema. The work of these filmmakers expressed creative freedom, audacity, and a self-confidence that made them stand out from the ordinary Hollywood productions. But that wasn't enough for Waters. He also admired the experimental artists like Andy Warhol, Kenneth Anger, Jonas Mekas, and brothers Mike and George Kuchar. Despite feeling out of place in Baltimore, John wasn't alone. He befriended another guy who would become his actor of choice, Harris Glenn Milstead. Glenn was very shy and fat, and other boys at school used to mock him because of that. But he also had a free spirit. John and Glenn shared their interest for cinema, camp aesthetic, big screen stars, and later on, drugs. They would regularly go to the bohemian bars in the sketchiest neighborhoods of Baltimore. John wanted to make films and Glenn wished to be a star. They were young, enthusiastic, and eager to triumph, but doing so by being themselves. John's parents noticed their son's artistic interest, and as a way to encourage him, but especially to keep him out of prison, they gave him an 8mm camera when he turned 16. 2 years later, he made his first short film, Hag in Black Leather Jacket, where a black man marries a white woman in a wedding officiated by a member of the Ku Klux Klan. The director was able to show it just one time in a beatnik cafeteria, but that was enough to recover the $30 he invested on shooting the film. In his next short film, Roman Candles, John called Glenn for his cinematographic debut. During the shooting, John suggested his friend an artistic name, Divine. He loved it and adopted it, knowing he wasn't exactly a drag queen, but an actor who portrays women. Besides Divine, John could count on a group of amateur actors that he and his friend met during that time. Unconventional young men who wanted to be part of the counterculture. Paying homage to Dreamland Pictures, a production company created by John, the gang called themselves the Dreamlanders. Among the members were Mink Stole, Pat Morin, Susan Walsh, Mary Vivian Pearce, and David Lochary. The director loved having his own version of Hollywood's star system. John himself also became a character, emulating his idol Little Richard, who started wearing a thin mustache that would become a trademark of his. After making more short films, John and his friends felt ready to face their first feature film, Mondo Trasho, a musical without dialogues. Just like all the previous crazy ideas the director had, it was filled with extravagant characters capable of unspeakable acts, but with an endearing personality. Just like when he made his short films, John didn't only direct, he also wrote the script, shot, lit the scenes, and edited the whole movie. Premiered in 1969, Mondo Trasho was the first feature made by John Waters, and also one of the first to get him in trouble with the law. He shot with no authorization at the Johns Hopkins University campus with a nude actor. He and part of the cast were arrested. Over the years, Waters considered that Mondo Trasho should have been a short film. Soon he would start developing his next film, Multiple Maniacs. Here, Divine acts as the leader of a freak show which is actually a cover-up for murderers and rapists. Divine also takes part in two of the most disturbing scenes, one which takes place in a church and has Mink Stole inserting a rosary in Divine's rectum, and the other where she is raped by a giant lobster. She also devoured a raw cow heart for another scene. According to Waters, Divine was punk even before punk existed. Multiple Maniacs was first screened in a church and pissed off the censorship board, who couldn't withhold it, even though they tried. Besides that, Divine showed audiences that her level of commitment in John's films was absolute. Her friend could ask her anything and she would do it gladly. Now that he had more confidence as a filmmaker, Waters was ready to carry out his most ambitious underground project. The idea came to him in one of his trips to California. Traveling with David Lochary, he was surprised after seeing a whole parking lot filled with vans and entire families living there. The director thought of a story about a family with that kind of lifestyle, but of course, it would be a grotesque, decadent family that defied the status quo. For this new film, Waters once again had his loyal Dreamlanders by his side. Divine would portray a criminal called Babs Johnson, who acts as the matriarch of a repugnant and perverted family. Adding to the premise, the film would include murder, cannibalism, and incest. Stole and Lochary would be Connie and Raymond Marble, the couple of villains who try to surpass Babs' family in their levels of abomination. Just like in Waters' previous films, Dreamlanders would work for no pay, just for the sake of making art. The director would also work in almost every aspect, but since this was supposed to be a more elaborate film, more expenses started to appear. Waters' only source of financing were his parents, and the most they had given him was $5,000 for his previous film. Now he would need at least twice that amount. Once again, his parents helped him and gave him $10,000, but this time, Waters made them both swear to never ever see the film. Waters knew exactly how to invest his money. He spent $100 on an old caravan that would be the Johnsons' home. He used another $100 to pay Vincent Peranio, who would take the role of production designer for the film. Peranio came from working with the director in multiple Maniacs, where he built the giant lobster. This time, he was in charge of making the interiors of the Johnsons' van. Other than that, he asked for 2 plastic Pink Flamingos that would be at the entrance, which gave meaning to the title of the movie, Pink Flamingos. Waters was determined to create a more quality piece. He would shoot in color and with a more professional crew, so he put some money in hiring a cameraman who would carry a 16mm camera. As it was a color film, the aesthetics would be more elaborated. Mink Stole and David Lochary had to change their hair color. Meanwhile, makeup artist and stylist Van Smith faced the challenge of giving Divine a unique look. They were looking for a mix between Jane Mansfield and Clarabelle the Clown, star of the famous TV show Howdy Doody. Divine agreed to shave half of her head off so Smith could draw huge eyebrows that would later become the character's trademark look. Another crucial detail was the film's main location. Thanks to a friend of Waters called Bob Adams, the crew could shoot at a farm in Phoenix, Maryland. Over there, the director and his friends put up some kind of hippie commune which would serve as their filming base. They were so stigmatized because of living in such conditions that, according to Waters, people believe to this day that he still lives in a van. To make matters worse, that Phoenix set had no running hot water and received just enough energy to keep some lights on. Considering this, Divine spent nights at Susan Lowe's house and would wake up before the sunrise to get the makeup done and be taken to the location. Waters had it much easier when it came to shooting the Marbles' house scenes. This was because everything was shot in the house where he and Mink Stole were staying during production. Although Waters was able to shoot Pink Flamingos more professionally, his crew members and cast still had to work and live their everyday lives during the weekdays. In fact, Stole had to use a wig to hide her red hair when she was not acting. The director was the only one that could invest all of his time in the film, and he would get everything ready to shoot during the weekends. Production took 6 months between 1971 and 1972. During shooting, Waters also decided to fire the cameraman, who didn't feel comfortable with some scenes. The director took the camera and shot everything that was left by himself. Even though $10,000 was a generous amount, it soon ran out, as some props were still missing. Peranio started stealing them from other places. Divine also stole some things and even got arrested, but told the police he was a method actor and was portraying a criminal. From the start, Waters knew that the last scene of Pink Flamingos needed to be the filthiest. It starts with a dog defecating on the sidewalk. Then Divine shows up, grabs the feces, and takes them into her mouth to pleasurably chew them. All of this happens in just one shot, without cuts, to confirm there were no tricks. The shot was the last one to be filmed, and it required a strange logistical approach. First, the director needed to make sure Divine was willing to eat real excrement. Of course, the answer was positive. Next step was feeding the dog raw meat for 3 days. When the time came to shoot, Waters and his crew followed the dog for 3 hours before he could go do his business. In the end, he defecated just before they ran out of natural light. After finishing the scene, Divine called a hospital emergency hotline saying her son had eaten dog feces and asked if there could be any harmful effects. The nurse told her that the worst thing that could happen was that the boy might get worms. Luckily for the actor, he didn't have any health issues. However, for years he would have to put up with questions about the experience of eating dog feces. After the shooting was complete, Waters locked himself up in the editing room. Since the story was supposed to have a voiceover narrator, he wanted to hire Mr. Ray, a renowned Baltimore presenter. But when Ray rejected the offer, Waters decided to do all the voiceover work by himself using the alias Mr. J. Another crucial detail would be the music. Waters went through his record collection from the 50s and 60s, but just like with Mondo Trasho, he never considered purchasing the rights and licenses for the songs. By 1997, he got almost all of them, and was able to edit a CD for the 25th anniversary of the film's premiere. Years later, Waters advised young filmmakers to think through the songs they would use, to avoid legal headaches and money problems. Pink Flamingos had its premiere in the 3rd Annual Baltimore Film Festival in March of 1972. The 3 screenings were full. Then it was screened at a theater dedicated to horror and gay porn in Boston. Little by little, it would find a new and wide audience. Ben Barenholtz, a distributor and the creator of the concept Midnight Movies, chose it to be part of a repeated screening in New York. He had already successfully screened El Topo by Alejandro Jodorowsky and thought he could achieve the same success with Waters' film. He wasn't wrong. An unprejudiced audience received Pink Flamingos with open arms and celebrated such a feast of decadence and grime. But not all audiences were happy. Least of all, the censorship board. Copies of Pink Flamingos was confiscated several times, and Waters had to go to court, accused of obscenity. He always pleaded guilty because, according to him, a fine was way cheaper than lawyer fees. Besides, all the controversy gave him a lot of free publicity. Pink Flamingos established John Waters as a terrorist of bad taste and as an icon of underground cinema. He continued filming independently with works such as Female Trouble and Desperate Living, but he was able to shoot big-budget productions thanks to New Line Cinema. He would direct personal and more commercial works like Polyester, Hairspray, Crybaby, and Serial Mom. He also wrote books, acted in other directors' movies, and gave talks at universities. He became very popular when he appeared on the 15th episode of The Simpsons' 8th season called Homer's Phobia. Divine also earned wide recognition. During the 70s and part of the 80s, she became a disco music star, but never stopped filming. Besides her adventures alongside Waters, she participated in films like Trouble in Mind. After that, he wanted to launch a more professional acting career without using his stage name, and took a secondary role in the popular sitcom Married with Children. But on March 7, 1988, before making his debut, he died from hypertrophic cardiomyopathy in his sleep. He was 42, but stayed alive in many aspects. He became an icon of sexual diversity and inspired the design for Ursula, the main villain of Disney's Little Mermaid. Pink Flamingos continues to be screened in film cycles and festivals, where it can be discovered by new generations. John Waters usually attends these screenings, and inevitably stays afterwards to answer questions about the infamous final scene. Pink Flamingos came into being thanks to a group of dementedly brave artists who sacrificed everything to achieve a masterpiece. John Waters, Divine, and all the Dreamlanders spat in the face of the establishment and gave us the most scatological and equally beloved cult movie.